In the literature review of Does Humor Matter? News is found to inspire what viewers think about through agenda setting. And so they present topics that serve to be top of mind. And so while we're not telling people what to think, or excuse me, while we're not telling people how to take a stance on a particular issue, by bringing it to top of mind, you are inspiring them as to what to think about. And so with that, when we look at this in a hard news setting, which is a general news program, um, the efficacy of agenda setting and comedy news, where the tone is lighter and comical, has yet to be studied in depth. And so that's kind of the literature review for this article. In regards to attitudes, so regardless of the tone that the news program shows, beliefs are still going to differ based on the individual. So attitudes that coincide with the message that's being proposed increase the likelihood of that individual accepting those messages. And so similarly, proposed agenda setting that contradicts individualistic beliefs is less likely to be accepted by those individuals. The knowledge about attitudes exposes the range of possibilities in accepting agenda setting in news entirely. For the hypotheses and research questions, individuals that are exposed to an issue through agenda setting will perceive that same issue as more prevalent compared to those that were not exposed to the issues, regardless of the news being in a comedy setting or in a hard setting. For the methods of this article, to test this theory, individuals from the same university were asked to complete a questionnaire to identify their pre-existing beliefs. This is done for a wide variety of political topics. So they were then assigned to listen to a radio program and then afterwards given a mathematical puzzle just to kind of distract them and minimize the bias ultimately. So then participants were asked to complete a questionnaire that included the agenda setting questions. During the radio programs that they were listening to, participants either received a comedy news program or a hard news program, and they both had the same topics that were being discussed in them. So beliefs were captured based on suggestive statements such as the government should do this or the government should not allow this. For the results, it's important to point out that for the demographics, it was college students, and so they were used for this experiment due to their generalizability to the internet population. So surprisingly, actually, the individual's acceptance of proposed topics varied based on the topic itself and then by the form of news. And so, for example, topics like offshore drilling had no differences in citations based on comedy news versus hard news. But for healthcare news, hard news had a stronger impact in the agenda setting process. For the topic of immigration specifically, though, the research question couldn't be solid. We couldn't get a solid answer for this question due to the small sample size that was used in the study, along with some other factors that were outlined that could have saturated the model, basically. So, as a part of the results, what was basically found is neither presentation style nor attitude could be proven to be a main predictor. Lastly, for the discussion, so while both styles of news had an agenda-setting effect, there was no data found that either hard news or comedy news has an effect on the individual's perceived prevalence of the issue. So specifically for immigration issues, again, the study reflected that the form of comedy news had a higher effect on perceived prevalence. So for offshore drilling and healthcare, on the other hand, hard news led to a higher perception of prevalence for each individual that was studied. So this leads to possible explanations such as a level of entertainment that's being provided in comedy news, which will lead to it being more accessible in memory. And for hard news, individuals may have found the issue to be prevalent, which would lead them to find the hard news stories as important. So outside of these nuances, the study was promising in exploring this further, mainly to pinpoint specifically how certain individualistic traits make comedy versus hard news more able of acceptance.